Your mind does not live inside your brain. I know that sounds completely absurd on its face. You almost certainly believe right now that your thoughts, your consciousness, and your fundamental sense of self are all contained strictly inside your skull, nested right between your ears in that 3-pound lump of neural tissue we call the brain. However, decades of studying neuroscience, quantum mechanics, and the nature of consciousness reveal a very different reality. Your mind does not exist in any single physical location. It is not contained within your brain, and it is not even contained within your body. Once you truly grasp why this is true, your entire perspective on human awareness changes. Let us take a deep journey through modern science to uncover why the true location of your mind is nothing like what you have been led to assume. When I was younger, before I began thinking deeply about consciousness, I defaulted to the standard assumption that the mind was obviously in the brain. Where else could it possibly be? When you think, your brain is doing the thinking. When you feel, neurons fire. When you remember, synapses activate. The brain seems to be the sole organ of the mind, and questioning that fact feels almost ridiculous. Yet the more we learn about neurobiology, consciousness, and mental processing, the more this oversimplified model breaks down. The mind is not located in the brain the way your stomach is located in your abdomen. It is something far stranger, vastly more distributed, and entirely outside our traditional categories of physical containment and location. To understand why, we must start with a fundamental question: what do we actually mean by the mind? Are we referring to subjective awareness, thought, selfhood, or experiential consciousness? While closely related, these concepts are not identical, and not one of them possesses a simple physical coordinate. Take consciousness itself, your raw awareness of being you in this exact moment. Where is it located? If you answer the brain, where specifically? There is no consciousness center in the brain, no single region that generates awareness when active and eliminates it when inactive. Instead, consciousness involves large, distributed neural networks spread across the entire brain. It is not localized to a single point or region. It is a global pattern of activity across shifting networks. This presents a serious challenge to the idea of a fixed mental location. Your brain constantly shifts which regions are active from millisecond to millisecond. Neurons fire and quiet down. Networks ignite and deactivate. If consciousness is defined by these dynamic patterns, then the location of consciousness is constantly moving across a changing neural terrain. Your mind exists wherever the relevant pattern of activity occurs, making it simultaneously everywhere and nowhere within the skull. Furthermore, the brain does not operate in isolation. It connects to the entire body through the nervous system, and mounting evidence proves the body is an active participant in cognition, not just a physical chassis. Consider your digestive system. Your enteric nervous system contains roughly 100 million neurons, more than the entire spinal cord. These neurons maintain constant communication with the brain via the vagus nerve, directly shaping your mood, decision-making, and emotional state. When you experience a gut feeling, that is not a poetic metaphor. It is a literal neurological signal altering your mental state. If your gut directly generates mental states, it is undeniably part of your mind. The same dynamic applies to your heart, which possesses its own intrinsic nervous system composed of tens of thousands of neurons processing complex information independently. The heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, actively influencing emotional processing, sensory perception, and cognitive choices. The literal pattern of your heartbeat dictates how you process thoughts and register feelings. The boundary separating mind from body is far blurrier than traditionally assumed. Your mind is fully embodied, extending through your nervous system, organs, and biochemical pathways. It exists not just in your brain, but across your entire physical body. Yet the boundary stretches even further. In 1998, philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers introduced the extended mind hypothesis, introducing a radical but straightforward concept. The mind is not bounded by the skull or the skin, because cognitive processes actively extend into the physical environment. Consider an Alzheimer's patient who relies on a notebook to record daily details. The notebook holds information their biological memory can no longer store. When they consult the notebook to recall a fact, that notebook fulfills the exact same functional role that biological memory performs in a healthy brain. Clark and Chalmers argue that the notebook is literally part of the person's cognitive system. Its physical material, paper rather than neurons, is irrelevant. What matters is its active functional role in processing information. Critics might object that external objects cannot be part of the mind. But why should mental boundaries stop at the skull? We already acknowledge that sensory organs outside the brain belong to the cognitive system. Your retina resides in your eye, not your brain, yet it is universally accepted as a core component of the visual system. If biological structures outside the skull form part of our cognition, external tools and storage media can as well. Consider your smartphone. You rely on it to retain phone numbers, schedules, navigation, and facts, constantly offloading internal mental tasks to an external device. When retrieving information, you query the device instead of searching biological pathways. The phone functions as active external memory and direct extension of your cognitive system. Your cognitive processes do not stop at your skin. They extend into your devices, your notes, and the structured spaces you inhabit. Your mind is distributed across brain, body, and world, existing wherever you extend your cognitive processing. Beyond physical objects, the mind extends outward through social cognition. Your mind is thoroughly embedded in and shaped by social networks. The concepts you process, the logic you apply, and the language you speak are inherited from other people. You did not invent language, you absorbed it from your culture, using it to categorize reality and construct thought. Your individual mind is thus part of a broader collective cognitive framework. When you engage in deep conversation, you do not simply exchange static data, you build a shared cognitive system. Two minds think in tandem, finishing thoughts, balancing ideas, and generating new concepts together. That collaborative thought process does not take place exclusively in one brain or the other, but in the interactive space between them. The resulting thought exists within the coupled system, a temporary collective mind formed through communication, shared culture, and group processing. Your mind extends directly into other people. Turning to physics, quantum mechanics presents an even stranger perspective on the nature of mind. In quantum mechanics, physical systems exist in superpositions of multiple potential states until an observation forces a collapse into a definite state. This measurement problem raises a fundamental question: what constitutes an observation, and does it require consciousness? Physicists like Eugene Wigner and John von Neumann posited that consciousness plays an active role in collapsing the wave function. If true, consciousness is not a mere byproduct of physical machinery, but a fundamental component of reality that interacts directly with physical states. While most modern physicists favor decoherence models to explain wave function collapse without invoking consciousness, the relationship between mind and matter remains deeply complex. If consciousness interacts with physical systems in any capacity, the mind is not a passive observer trapped inside a head. It is an active, entangled participant in a shared quantum system. This connects directly to the hard problem of consciousness, framed by David Chalmers. While neuroscience can address the functional aspects of mind, how the brain processes sensory data, stores memories, and controls movement, it cannot explain why these physical operations generate subjective experience. Why does neural firing produce the vivid sensation of seeing red, tasting chocolate, or feeling grief? Because physical processes fail to explain subjective experience, some philosophers suggest consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe, like mass or charge, rather than a secondary emergent product of brain tissue. If consciousness is fundamental, the brain does not create it. Instead, the brain acts as a receiver, filter, and organizer of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, your mind is organized by the brain rather than produced by it, making the mind a question of dynamic organization rather than physical location. Neuroscience confirms this structural fluidity through split-brain research. The brain's two hemispheres communicate via the corpus callosum. In severe epilepsy cases where surgeons sever this connection, The two hemispheres are isolated from one another, producing astonishing results. Testing reveals that split-brain patients possess two distinct streams of conscious awareness within a single skull. The left hemisphere, which controls the right side of the body and handles speech, and the right hemisphere, which controls the left side and handles spatial awareness, operate independently. If an image is presented exclusively to the right hemisphere, the patient cannot state what they saw because the right hemisphere lacks speech output. However, they can point to the object with their left hand. The right hemisphere processed and understood the visual input, but could not transmit that awareness to the left hemisphere. This proves consciousness can split into independent channels, directly challenging the notion of a single, localized mind. Your mind is not a monolithic object pinned to one spot. It is a collection of processes that typically operate together, but can separate when disconnected. This structural mobility is further demonstrated by neuroplasticity. The physical architecture of your brain rewires itself continuously based on experience. When you master a skill, new neural pathways form. When a skill goes unused, connections degrade. If brain tissue is damaged, alternative regions can adapt to take over lost tasks, shifting language or memory processing across hemispheres. The mind is a nomadic pattern of activity that moves and reorganizes across neural space over time. This brings us to the philosophical problem of personal identity. What keeps you *you over time? Consider the classic ship of Theseus paradox. If every wooden plank of a ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? The exact same paradox applies to your mind. The physical components of your brain are in constant flux. Atoms, molecules, and cellular structures are continuously replaced. Within a few years, the physical matter comprising your brain is entirely different. Furthermore, your psychological composition, your memories, knowledge, and personality changes dramatically over decades. You persist not because of fixed physical matter, but because of a continuous dynamic pattern. Personal identity is a process unfolding through time rather than a static object trapped in space. You are an evolving pattern that continuously reconstitutes itself. Recognizing that the mind is non-localized reshapes how we approach major human domains. Mental health, if the mind is distributed across brain, body, and environment, treating mental illness requires addressing the whole system. Modifying environment, lifestyle, physical activity, and social connections directly alters the extended cognitive apparatus, explaining why holistic interventions are so effective. Education, if tools and environments form part of our cognition, learning is not about cramming facts into biological memory. It is about training individuals to leverage external tools, structure environment, and collaborate effectively within shared networks. Artificial intelligence, if mind is defined by information processing rather than biological tissue, artificial systems can form part of cognitive networks. Humans already use AI to extend their cognitive bandwidth, creating hybrid systems where mind is distributed across both biological and synthetic substrates. Looking to the future, as brain-computer interfaces advance, biological neural activity will link directly with digital networks. Thoughts will flow between carbon and silicon, distributing minds across interconnected physical and digital architectures. Collective network intelligences may emerge, distributing cognitive processes across vast multi-agent systems where asking where the mind lives becomes entirely meaningless. Your mind does not live inside your brain because the mind is not a physical object in a fixed space. It is an emergent, extended relational process. It forms through the continuous interaction of your brain, your body, your tools, your environment, and the other minds around you. It exists everywhere you actively engage with the world. Far from being trapped inside your skull, your mind extends outward into the world, interacting with tools, culture, and fellow human beings. You are an active component of a vast cognitive ecosystem. Your mind is not in your head, it is everywhere your reach extends.